Hello, I'm often asked how we recreate missing decals or badges from amplifiers that we're restoring. One of the ways is to 3D print a replacement. Now, some 3D printers are better than others, but in order to get the best possible 3D print file, we start off with a photograph of what's missing. So in this situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a make-believe company called Lorem Ipsum, as you'll recognise from Microsoft's Word and other packages. And in this particular situation, the P has gone missing. It's fallen off and we haven't got it anymore, but we have got a picture, and so that's in front of us at the moment. So how do we get from this picture to a plastic P that we can connect to the front of the amplifier using the little plastic round sort of nubs that go into the holes? This is how we. This is one way that we can do it. First of all, we get a picture showing what we actually what we're missing, such as this picture here, and we're going to edit that, and we're just going to crop out what we don't need. So basically, I'm using the standard Windows imaging program. You can use anything, Paint, Photoshop, you name it. Luckily, we've been able to remove everything that doesn't constitute part of. We've removed everything that isn't part of the letter P, apart from the white background. So we'll have that. It may well be that you've got to do several crops of different pieces, even go in with a graphics package and get rid of certain bits. But basically, you want to be left with just the part that you're actually going to be working with. And I'm going to save this as crop and place that on the desktop. Okay, so we now have a JPEG or similar graphics image of the bit that we're actually missing. And what we now want to do is turn that into a piece of plastic. So I'm going to use two packages which are free for private use for hobbyists. The first of those packages is a package called Inkscape. Now Inkscape, we're going to use that because that will turn that graphic into what's called a vector. Now a vector is basically a way of describing a picture using sort of left, right, circle and so on. Now you can imagine if you're just describing it in such way, then it doesn't matter how big or small that particular image is, it'll be smooth, and you can blow it up, you can rotate it, and it keeps the image exactly as it should be. The problem with bitmaps is if you get a small bitmap and then blow it up, it becomes quite blocky. So we need to convert the image we have into a smooth vector. So what I've done is I've dragged the P onto Inkscape, and I'm going to leave it with the default apart from smooth optimized quality. Click on OK, and we now have the P in Inkscape. I'm going to now turn that into a vector using the path and trace to bitmap option. Now what you need to do now is you can look at the actual image here, and you'll see that most of it is black. This bit here is quite pitted with white bits, and that's because if you look at the image, there's bits of white in there. So what we need to do is we need to mess around with the brightness threshold. Okay, so basically what we've done is we've adjusted the threshold up and down, and you need to press the update button to basically make it update. So we now have a vector of the image of the P. Click OK. That is now drawn onto the paper. We can get rid of that. Now what we need to do is remove the original bitmap. So what I'm doing now is I'm just zooming out so we can actually see the whole thing. So if I now click on the arrow, this is move. So that's the bitmap. Sorry, that's the vector, and this is the bitmap. So if you remember, the bitmap is on the bottom, just in case your picture was black as well. So we're now just going to delete that. We don't need that anymore, and we're now left with just the vector. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as an SVG file, which is a vector graphics file, and I'm going to save that again to the desktop. We started off with an image. We've cropped that image down to the bit we need, and we've dropped that into Inkscape, adjusted the settings, and we've now got a straight vector graphic. Okay, so we now have our vector graphics file, and what we're going to do now is we're going to use a package called Fusion 360. This is quite an expensive package if bought for business use, but they do have a free way of owning it, which is for hobby use or education. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a sketch and drop that in. I'm going to be using Fusion 360 for a number of videos coming up. This particular video, I'm just going to go through what you need to do. The next video I'll be explaining in detail how you do things when I design the case for the valve tracer, which is coming up hopefully at weekend. So we've now got an empty screen, and I'm going to create sketch, click on the one between the green and the red, which is bottom, and I'm now going to insert SVG, which is the file type that we saved it at earlier. So if I click on that and then insert from computer, desktop, Kawasaki, and that's the package. And you can now see that we have the image in front of us, or we have the outline of it. Right, so we're now going to place that, the origin, click OK, finish sketch. So we've now got our vector graphic P. So what we can do now is we can work on that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click it, press pull, and I'm going to make it 3mm thick. Okay, now it's just started computing that, and we now have the P 3mm thick, and obviously this is the top plate of the top part of the letter. So what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to flip it upside down. We have the bottom. This is now the bottom of it. This is to attach the fixings. If the item is just glued in place, you could print it just like that, making sure that you scale it to fit. If you need to add little nubbins to actually connect it on, like say Marshall lettering does, you can now add it to the bottom here. But to do that, we just need to create a sketch on that plane. So create sketch. That's on the bottom. This plate will now be for those fixing attachments. And what we're going to do is I'm going to print. Obviously, you'd measure where these would need to be, and that's 2.5 millimeters. And I'll do another one of 2.5 millimeters as well. Again, this would be measured. So okay, so these are going to be the two round fixings to attach it to the amplifier. Now obviously I've just placed these randomly, but if you know the measurements, you can actually fix these in place from a particular side. It's not a problem. What I'm going to do now is just show you what you do once you've got those two in the place where you want them. So you click on one, click on the other, right, push pull, and then how long these need to be. So that's now done that. And we now have our letter P from a photograph with the fitting nubs ready for 3D printing. Okay, now that we've got our letter with the fixing nubs in place, we can send that to the slicer for printing. Now if we're just printing it with a flat face, as in the picture at the moment, you can just print it upside down and it'll stay flat because it's being printed on a flat bed. If you want to print it and there's a rounded off edge or other shape on it, for instance, there might be the letter P in the middle and it might rise to that, then in that case you'll need to print it the correct way up. If that's the case, you just need to make sure that your 3D slicer program adds supports. That's just a simple how-to on how to print replacement missing letters for an amplifier or a vintage computer or something similar. I'm going to show you in another video in the next week or so how to print two colours for a badge using a one colour printer. There's a very good technique which allows you to do that, and it builds upon the technique that I've shown you now. So if you can subscribe, then you'll be notified when that video is released. And whilst I've been putting the video together, I 3D printed the letter, and I'll show you that now.